Welcome to the Pull Podcast. I am Big Jack, your host. Today with us, we have Brian Cuban, attorney, author, and addiction recovery advocate. Welcome to the show, Brian.
Thanks for having me. It's an honor to be here.
On the show, we try to focus on people's stories originally and then try to get into some of the things that they're doing in their life today. And obviously, we focus on, the real stories, the raw struggles, and then the powerful comebacks, right? And the powerful comeback, one that you've had, one that I've seen on. And so we're really excited to hear a little bit about the story. So if you don't mind, you could go into some of that for us.
Sure. Well, I'm in long-term recovery from cocaine and alcohol. I'm also in recovery from bulimia, believe it or not, an eating disorder. Yes, guys do get eating disorders.
Sure.
And it all really started back growing up in Pittsburgh. And just to give you the Reader's Digest, at 18 years old, I developed an eating disorder as a freshman at Penn State. I also developed alcohol addiction, and I was an alcoholic by the time I was 19. By the time I was 26, I was addicted to cocaine. By the time I was 44, my first of 2 trips to a psychiatric facility after a near suicide attempt, jail.
So you can see the progression.
Yes, jail on my resume.
Of course.
And then finally, after another trip to a psychiatric facility, Easter weekend 2007, I began my recovery journey. In between all of that was I lost my career as a once successful lawyer.
Were you disbarred or you just lost?
No, believe it or not, I have not been disbarred, and my license has never been suspended, but it wasn't for a lack of trying.
Of course.
You
gave it your best.
I gave it my best, and I say that tongue in cheek. But if you look in the back of whether it's the California Bar Journal or the Texas Bar Journal, you're going to see the list. We call them the pages of shame, right? You're going to see the list of all the lawyers who've been suspended and disbarred, and a good portion of them are going to correlate with alcohol and drug use.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. And it's a high stress job. And so I imagine that didn't help fuel the fire.
It doesn't help. And it didn't help that I never wanted to be a lawyer. And we can talk about that. And a lot of people don't know that lawyers suffer from alcoholism at a rate twice the general public. Over 20% of lawyers qualify as alcoholics.
I believe it.
And if you are a lawyer, I would say millennial lawyer, it gets up to over 30%. If you're a female millennial lawyer, it gets up to close to 40%.
I love that you know these facts.
Yeah, and that comes from a seminal study that was done by the Hazelton Betty Ford and the California Bar Association.
So very reputable sources.
Yes. And there was a more recent study that found that over the pandemic, it got worse for lawyers.
Also makes sense.
Yes.
I think addiction and alcoholism rose significantly. The fact that people had to be in their homes all day long.
Yes, it makes it easier to reach for the bottle, for the beer, get that glass of wine. And it may have been someone who might not have qualified for alcohol use disorder, but you're at that line, then all of a sudden you tip over, right? Mm-hmm. Because that becomes that becomes the coping mechanism when you're alone, when you're shut in from the pandemic. And I think that's a big reason why things rose.
Sure. Yeah. And people could actually get away with having a few drinks and stuff too. And so they may wake up, and the fact that they don't have to, see people in person and they could just get on a Zoom call, it's probably very easy for the people that are right there teetering on that edge or that invisible line that we talk about, for them to kind of, give themselves permission or to talk themselves into it. And then from there, it's just a matter of time.
Sure. And for those people who are already there, drunk Zooming was certainly a thing.
Absolutely, yeah. The ones that maybe don't slur their words or as obvious as others. Absolutely.
Because what's the definition of addiction? Obsessive compulsive drug-seeking behavior despite known and probable negative consequences, right?
Yeah, say that again.
Yeah, so obsessive compulsive drug-seeking behavior despite probable negative consequences.
Perfect.
So you're going to go on the Zoom regardless.
Yeah, that's crazy. This segment of the Pull Podcast is brought to you by Heartwood Home Detox.
So I grew up in Pittsburgh, PA, baby boomer. I'm the middle of 3 boys. People might know my older brother, Mark, from Shark Tank and the Dallas Mavericks, which he just sold.
Yes, sir.
And then I have a younger brother, Jeff. Mark, growing up as the firstborn, he was outgoing. He was entrepreneurial even as a kid. I remember our local newspaper printers went on strike, shutting down both our newspapers. Mm-hmm. Him and his buddies, barely old enough to drive, went out to Cleveland, which is about 200 miles from Pittsburgh, drove out there. They bought the Cleveland Plain dealer, 100 copies.
Yep.
Drove them back to Pittsburgh and sold them on a street corner in downtown Pittsburgh during rush hour for twice what they paid for.
I was going to say, from what I know about your brother, probably at a premium.
Yeah, at a premium. Why else, right? So even as a teenager, he was able to fill voids and see a need and capitalize on that. You knew what he was going to be.
Yeah, exactly.
My younger brother, Jeff, was a nationally ranked wrestler, good-looking kid, jock, the beer parties, the dates, the prom, everything that I associated with kind of love and acceptance, right? Peer acceptance.
Absolutely.
I was classic middle child syndrome. I was shy, I was withdrawn, and I internalized anything negative said to me and wore it as who I was, like a skin-tight suit. I was a heavy kid. I was obese. And unfortunately, I had a difficult relationship with my mother at home. And I'll tell you a little bit about this, but I want to make it clear that I don't blame my mother.
Of course not.
Right? There is a difference between cause and correlation.
I love that.
And so things that happen in the home can correlate with mental health issues later in life, but for a lot of people, it won't. And there was a lot of fat shaming. I used to come home from school for lunch, open up the cupboard, pull out a can of Chef Boyardee ravioli or beefaroni or SpaghettiOs. I loved it. Mm-hmm. We didn't have a microwave. This was the 70s, so I'd pull out the can opener and twist it open and eat it right out of the can with the spoon. My mother would walk into the kitchen. She sold real estate, so she'd come home sometimes or she'd be gone. And not all the time, but every now and then, depending on what kind of mood she was in, she'd say, Brian, if you keep eating like that, you're going to be a fat pig. Now, these were the things my grandmother said to her. I heard, I've witnessed my grandmother. These were the things I suspect my great-grandmother said to my grandmother. Fat shaming is often handed down generationally in families.
Right.
I come from she was a Lithuanian Jewish family from the old country, the stereotypical Jewish fixation on food, eat. And my mother had a very mentally, verbally abusive relationship with her diagnosed schizophrenic mother.
Yeah.
Very verbally abusive.
Well, they do say hurt people, right?
Yes. And so things were passed down. And so I didn't understand this at that time, which caused me to have a very difficult relationship with my mother. And the way I coped with it was to eat and to isolate in my bedroom.
So that was your first addiction?
Yes, food.
Yeah.
And so I would eat more and I became a bigger Brian and a bigger Brian. And as so often happens in grade school, middle school, high school, when kids change for what other kids perceive in the negative, the bullying started. The fat taunts. It happened then. It happens now, just in a different way now, right? With social media.
Sure.
Back then, it was brick and mortaring to your face. And, the Brian, you're a fat pig. Well, you must talk to my mom. Brian, you need to go to Sears and back when Sears was a thing, and get a bra for your man boobs. And obviously, it hurt a lot. It hurt a lot. And I didn't tell anyone.
No, of course not.
And it all culminated one day in what I call the Day of the Gold Pants.
Oh, boy.
This was 1976. And if you're not a boomer or maybe Gen X, you may not remember this, but it was the disco era, right? Where you had Saturday Night Fever and John Travolta. And bell-bottom pants and platform shoes and greased hair. And my brother Mark, believe it or not, was teaching disco at this club downtown. I believe it was called Club Odyssey.
That's a great visual.
Yes. And here's another visual. He would come home in bell-bottom pants, flowered or satin, and platform shoes. And one day he walked into my bedroom and he opened the door and he was holding up this pair of shiny gold bell-bottom disco pants. Satin. He said, Brian, do you want these? I'm replacing them. And I love my brother. We're very close. I grabbed the pants. I said, yes. And I decided I was wearing those pants to school. But there was a problem. Mark wasn't a big guy. They fit him well. I had to jump up and down, spray the water bottle. My butt looked like 15 cats trying to get out.
I believe it.
But I didn't care, and I wore those pants. And the kids made fun of me, and my gut was hanging out over the bulging seam. And one day, I'm walking home from school. It's a mile walk to my house from the high school, wearing my shiny gold bell-bottom disco pants, and there are three other guys. And in my mind, these were the popular kids that I wanted to be around.
Of course.
Like the football guys, the kids who were going to the after-school parties, the kids who were going to the prom.
The in crowd.
The kids who were doing everything that I wanted so much, getting their first date, getting their first kiss, walking down the aisle between the lockers, holding hands with their girlfriend, all the things that I wanted so badly, but didn't think fat pigs were entitled to. And they're making fun of my pants. And one of them pulls at the zipper right below the waist seam. And it rips just a little bit, just a little. And the next kid goes, ooh. And he yanks at it, and it rips all the way right down the zipper, exposing exposing my underwear.
The chonies, the tighty whities.
Tighty whities. And the next thing I knew, these kids were on me like, flies on honey, rabid dogs. They tore my pants off me, ripped their individual pieces into shreds, and threw them out in the street, in a busy street, cars whizzing by. And they walk down the sidewalk.
That's traumatic.
Yes. They walk down the sidewalk, high-fiving, looking back. Cubes, wait till we see you in school tomorrow, right? And you have to remember, that was terrifying, because in my day, going viral meant 15 kids in the lunchroom knew.
Talking about it.
And were passing notes.
Yeah.
That was going viral in my day.
Yeah.
But it didn't, you're a product of your times. It didn't hurt any less.
No. If anything, it was worse. Like you said, it was to your face.
Yeah. And they went on walking. I walked out in the busy street and picked up the shreds. And I covered up my tighty whities. And I remember I was wearing a Pittsburgh Pirates t-shirt, three-ring tube socks, and Keds tennis shoes.
Nice.
I don't know why I remember that, but I do.
Yeah.
And
well, it was traumatic, so it's ingrained.
It was ingrained. And that mile walk to my house might as well have been from Pittsburgh to Sausalito, across the country.
That's what it felt like.
That's what it felt like. And the worst part, you know what the worst part was?
I'm listening.
The stoplights. There were 2 stoplights, and every stoplight felt like it took an hour.
I believe it.
As I'm standing there in my underwear, looking at the ground, because I didn't want to make eye contact with the people in the cars.
Mm-hmm.
No one rolled down their window. No one said anything. And I finally get home. And the house was empty. Funeral quiet. And I walked down into our basement holding the shreds. And we had these old blue wooden stairs. And I had never noticed before. But they creaked. And I'd never noticed that creak. But those creaks, each creak felt like a gunshot into the water that was reverberating, the ripples reverberating out to my father, who ran a trim shop in 2 miles away, where they reupholster car seats, very working class guy.
Mm-hmm.
My mother selling real estate to my brothers, wherever they were, who were all going to be just disgusted with me. Maybe even tell me not to come home, right? The things that go through the mind of a 12, 13-year-old boy.
Yeah.
In my mind, it was all real, because the physical assault was real. Why should they want me anymore? In reality, that isn't true, right? My parents love me dearly, including my mother. My brothers would have said, where are they? Let's go.
Yeah, let's
We're
go.
going.
Yeah.
Let's do this.
But that's not what's going on in your head.
But that's not what's going on in my head.
Mm-hmm.
So I found a wastebasket, pushed aside the Chef Boyardee cans and newspapers, and I buried those shreds, hoping it would bury my shame, bury my trauma. But that's not how trauma works.
No.
Trauma threads. Trauma remembers. And trauma has a way of boiling over when we least expect it, at a time when we think we have compartmentalized that moment in history and told myself I'm over it so many times that it's nothing you ever really think about again.
Mm-hmm.
And it was right then, when we talk about snapshot moments in our life,
sure,
it was then that I remember for the first time seeing, instead of Brian in my reflection, seeing a fat pig whether it was the bathroom mirror, whether it was a mall window or a car window, seeing a fat pig who wasn't worthy of love, who wasn't worthy of friendship, who was never going to have a girlfriend. So why should he try to integrate in life?
Yeah, it was a lot of all or none thinking too, right?
Yes. And so I went on to Penn State University, about 150 miles.
The Nittany Lions.
The Nittany Lions, yes. About 150 miles from Pittsburgh, thinking it was going to be a whole new Brian. I'd make friends, get away from the bullies. But as irony so has it, half these bullies ended up at the same school. Yeah. And I'd see
your
it.
luck.
Yeah, my luck. And because that's where people went. And I remember it was my father had driven me up. It was the first day. And my first day at Penn State, we're unpacking in my dorm. I was going to share a dorm with these 3 other guys. And my father's helping me unpack. And I'm looking out the window, and it's this crisp, cool fall day in central Pennsylvania. Leaves are coming down, and people are in the parking lot unpacking, parents and kids jabbering. And I make eye contact with this curly, brown-haired girl.
Oh, yeah.
And I start sweating. And in my mind, I imagine my entire life with this girl within a space of 5 seconds. We're going to date. We're going to get married, and we're going to have 2 1/2 children.
Wow.
And then
that's a lot of detail for 5 seconds.
With another sickening moment in that sixth second, I realized that it wasn't a smile, it was a smirk. She turns to her friend, she turns back to me, cups her hands over her mouth, creating the hand megaphone, right? Ugly. And I don't blame her either. Kids can be cruel, whether you're in college or grade school.
Sure.
Kids can say cruel things. And another kid may have said ugly back. Another kid may have flipped her off, given her the elbow salute. But so kids respond different ways. But I was someone who already felt ugly.
Yeah, that didn't help, right? Now it's just more quote unquote evidence.
It was, yeah, you're right. And I thought to myself, she's right. She's just validating what I already knew.
That's pretty sad.
And how can I not be ugly? How can I not be ugly? By not being a fat pig. So I began to starve myself. And I stopped eating. Mm-hmm. And I developed also bulimia, which is binging and purging. And I began to lose all this weight. But guess what? No matter how much weight I lost, every time I saw my reflection in the mirror,
you still hated it.
I still hated it. I still hated that ugly, fat pig. And I began to drink because I didn't want to feel at all when I saw that reflection.
Sure.
And by the time very quickly going into my sophomore year at Penn State, I was an alcoholic. I was drinking alone. I was going to class drunk and hungover. I would go when I became old enough to go to the drinking age was 21, and I would go to the state stores. That's how the alcohol was sold back then in state-owned stores. And I would buy a little bottle of tequila, and I would go into the alleys where the bars were, and I'd swig the tequila in the hope that I could become a different person drunk before I walked up into the bar, and maybe I'd meet a girl and it never worked that way.
Yeah, I called that pre-gaming.
Yeah, I tried to pre-game, but it never worked that way. I just go into the bar and I would drink more alone. I would get more upset at myself. I would get more depressed, and I would go home and I would cry. I'd go to my dorm and I would cry and I would cry and I would cry.
So you're a sensitive guy.
I was. And I still am. I'm
sure.
The guy who cries at a note of music.
Yeah. There's nothing wrong with that. You're just in touch with it.
It's who I am.
Sure.
It's who I am. I've always worn my feelings on my shirt sleeve.
Yeah.
Kind of an empath type guy.
Yeah, of course.
But the dead bird in the road can ruin my life for a week. But I kept drinking, And the closest I ever came to any epiphany on recovery during my time at Penn State, my 4 years, was walking into a hamburger joint. I believe it was a White Castle, drunk, of course, and finding a rack of pamphlets. And I don't know if they still do this, but it was the 12-step groups put it out, and it was geared towards college students. And it was called the 20 Questions.
Yeah, they still have it, I think.
And they were, do you black out? Do you miss class? Call us, right? Call this number. And I'm checking off yes, yes, yes. And I just said to myself, I'm a college student. We all do this. And I just crumpled it up, hit the wastebasket, my tryout for the Dallas Mavericks. And that was it. That was as close as I ever came. And you have to remember, this is now the 80s. Residential treatment wasn't really a thing.
No.
You either came across someone in 12-step, your parents or somebody took interventive action, or you were just out there.
Shit out of luck.
You were just out there on your own.
Yeah.
And so I was out there on my own. I wanted to be a police officer. I was a criminal justice major. That would have worked out well. I'd have been the first guy in the evidence room trading out the baby laxative for the blow.
I can only imagine.
I wanted to be a cop. And one day, I'm sitting in my senior year. I'm sitting in the placement office at Penn State, thumbing through cops' jobs. They used to send out these pamphlets. This is before computers. Send out these pamphlets, and you're looking San Francisco, Dallas, wherever, any place but Pennsylvania. And I heard two guys next to me talking about going to law school. And I close the pamphlet and I start listening. And the bells start going off in my head. Not the bells of, I want to be a lawyer. Not the bells of, I want to be the next Clarence Darrow or emulate Atticus Finch. Save the world, social justice, make money. The bells of, law school is 3 years. If I go to law school, I can drink, I can binge and purge, and I had also developed exercise bulimia, which is obsessive compulsive exercise for the primary purpose of offsetting calories. I was running up to 20 miles a day.
Holy mackerel.
And drinking and binging and purging, it was a huge stress on my body.
I'll say.
Yeah, there were some days I couldn't get out of bed. Surprised I didn't have a stroke.
Yeah.
And I can engage in, if I go to law school, I can engage in all the behaviors that have allowed me to survive at the tip of my nose.
That is such an addict thought,
for
right?
4 years, right?
Yeah.
I will not have to give up any of these behaviors that are mine. These behaviors belong to me. And I am not going to go out in the world where I'm going to have to give them up to someone in 12-step or someone in treatment or anything, right? To my parents, to my brothers, to anyone who might say this isn't normal.
Yeah.
And so that made perfect sense to me.
And you're away from people who may be able to see some of this stuff too, right?
You're right. No one ever said a word to me. I spent most of my time, I'd go home, right? And my parents really didn't notice. I hid my eating disorder behaviors.
Because it's only for a day or two
So
for a
you're only home
holiday
for
or
a day
something.
two, right. If I binged and purged, I went to the bathroom and flushed, turned on the shower. They didn't
Nobody
know.
was the wiser. Yeah.
Nobody was the wiser. Nobody was the wiser at school. Kids at school, they're into their own stuff. They're drinking.
Yeah.
You fit right in. Kids are thrown up in the alleys, doing this and doing that. I was not different. I was not much different than a lot of the other kids at the frat parties or whatever, right? So no one was going to say anything unless it would be an adult.
So law school, huh?
So I decided to go to Pitt Law, University of Pittsburgh. And I got in, surprisingly, and I walked through the doors as an alcoholic, as someone with an eating disorder with the exact same behaviors that allowed me to exist at the tip of my nose. Because that's the only way I knew to live, was at that tip. Not thinking 3 years out, not thinking beyond that moment.
Yep.
Survival. And that, unfortunately, that is not quite the recipe for being a good law student. Going to class drunk, going to class hungover. I was a terrible law student. I graduated near the bottom of my class because I was engaging in all the behaviors that allowed me to survive but do okay at Penn State.
Yeah, well, I mean, bare minimum, right?
In college, I could pull an all-nighter, take the exam, and do okay. They're grading on a straight, they're grading straight percentage. That's not how it works in law school. You're competing with every other student who were the best of their, who were the best in undergrad.
Gotcha.
I mean, I graduated so low. I have reoccurring dreams about the dean of the law school when I go to take my diploma, going psych and pulling it back, right? And the irony is that I didn't even go to graduation because I was so ashamed. Just mail it to me. But it became serendipitous because back in 2020, during the pandemic, they asked me to keynote the 2020 commencement as someone who had overcame that to be successful, one of the graduates.
That's amazing.
So I wore the cap and gown for the first time in my life.
Yeah, that's an honor.
I started a student wellness fund at the University of Pittsburgh.
Good for you.
To help people who were struggling from mental health issues, and it is now named after me.
Good.
So whatever legacy I may have, there's a little bit there. I don't care much about legacy, right, because you're dead, but that was very gratifying.
No, it's like, we want to leave this place better than we found it, right?
Yeah.
And I'm a big believer in legacy. I think that's admirable, and I think that's the reason why we're put on earth is to leave something behind to some degree.
Yeah, and so, even if it's 50 people down, right? Somebody's life is better.
Somebody's life is better.
Because the cogs of recovery started with you.
Amen.
Or started with me. And so I graduated, and now I have to go through the same cycle of thought as when I graduated from Penn State. What am I going to do with my life? I never wanted to be a lawyer, but here I am with the law degree. I took the Pennsylvania bar and miraculously passed, but there was no way in hell I was staying in Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm.
So where to go? Well, both of my brothers had already moved to Dallas, Texas. So about 1,200 miles from Pittsburgh. So with $200 to my name, a duffel bag full of nasty old clothes, my college graduation suit, I went to Dallas. My brother Mark met me in the Greyhound parking lot, and I moved in with him. And he knew nothing about my issues. My younger brother knew nothing about my issues. It was like throwing gasoline on a fire because they're young. They're going out partying. They're dating. They didn't use drugs, but we're hitting the bars. I hadn't taken the Texas bar yet, which I failed 3 times due to drugs and alcohol. And so I just fit right in.
Yeah. So what were you doing for money at this point then? If you could, because you couldn't be a lawyer, were you at like
I got to work as an adjuster.
Okay.
I got work as a claims adjuster.
Okay.
For Travelers Insurance.
Very cool.
And so in the summer of 1987, I finally discovered the one thing in the bathroom of a nightclub in Dallas, Texas, that finally allowed me to look in the mirror and say, I love that guy. We can guess what that was. Cocaine. I had a buddy. He said, hey, and he was into the scene at that time. And he said, got a dealer here. You want to try it? It'll make you feel great. And I said, who doesn't want to feel great? And I felt like shit. And drinking rarely did it for me, where I mean, drinking always felt, but I couldn't stop because I always, because I just didn't want to feel anything.
Mm-hmm.
And so we found the dealer, and he gave me a free sample line. We went down to the bathroom together, and I snorted it off this nasty toilet. And cocaine users were, and people who snort were kind of an ironic bunch, right? Because especially in pandemic times, you'll use the Purell, you'll make sure you are sanitized and everything, but we'll snort over that. We'll roll up a dollar bill.
The dirtiest thing on the planet.
Yeah, we'll roll up this nasty dollar bill that who has God knows what on it, and lean over a bathroom that's been snorted off by 50 other people and has God knows what on it.
Put it in your nose.
And put it up our nose. Go figure.
Go figure.
But, and as I leaned over, here's an interesting tidbit. And as I leaned over that toilet, I remember thinking about, do you remember the basketball player Lenny Bias?
Yeah, he died at the free throw.
He died, supposedly the first line of cocaine he ever did, right?
Oh, I didn't hear that.
Yeah,
I thought he was an addict.
No, not to my knowledge.
Oh, wow.
And he died doing a line of cocaine because he had a reaction. He had a heart reaction.
Okay.
And he was he was projected to be the number 1 draft pick. I think he was for the Boston Celtics.
Yep.
And he died. And it had only happened just, I think, 6 months before. And I remember leaning over thinking, I hope I don't Lenny Bias.
So at that point, you still like wanted to be alive then? Because I've heard some of your story where you had some thoughts of not wanting to be around anymore.
Yeah, that would be 17 years later,
Okay.
17 years, 18 years later.
All right.
So this was 1987.
Gotcha.
And so
at that point, yeah, you're like, please don't let me croak over.
It was a passing thought.
Yeah.
It was a passing thought, but it wasn't passing enough for me not to snort.
I was going to say, clearly not.
Again, we get back to the definition of addiction, right?
Right.
And so I snorted it, and it was, yeah, baby. It was, Brian is ready for Dallas. Brian is cool. Brian is good looking. That curly brown-haired girl would have loved this Brian.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Brian's mother loved Brian, and she did. But those bullies, you know, Brian would have killed those bullies, kicked their asses.
Yeah.
But this was a whole new cocaine-infused Brian. And I walked upstairs to that club, and I was, yeah, baby, asking girls to dance. Let's go. But then
Powdered confidence, right?
powdered confidence, but then it starts to wear off, right? And you get a little lockjaw, you get a little paranoid, and it's like, shit, Brian hates Brian again. Where's that dealer? Brian had to love Brian again. Where's that dealer?
So it was immediate for you.
Yeah. Oh, because I became depressed. I went from the Brian I had never known, this confident guy, you know, who asked a girl to dance for the first time in his life, right? And kissed a girl on the dance floor, you know, it's consensual, right? She kissed me.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden back to this fat pig.
Mm.
I couldn't be that fat pig anymore. I just couldn't. I didn't want to be that fat pig. So I found the dealer. I had $90 left in my pocket, gave it to him, gave me a gram, and went down to that same bathroom, and Brian loved Brian again and again and again and again. And alcohol and cocaine took over my life, starting there, the summer of 1987.
Every day?
In that bathroom. It didn't start as every day. It started as weekends.
Gotcha.
It started as weekends.
But it progressed.
It progressed. It progressed through 3 failed marriages, all failing as the result of drugs. My second marriage, she was a neonatal intensive care nurse. And so she worked odd hours, right? And so she was working the midnight shift. And when she left, I would go out with my buddies and we would snort cocaine all evening. And she would come home and I'd be showered, you know, and being in bed and and cleaned up. And one evening I was out. I mean, we must have gone. She was out working. She was working, saving babies. Well, I'm out going through 2 8-balls in an evening with my friend and his girlfriend. And I get home and we hadn't been married that long. And my heart goes into an arrhythmia, right? Boom, 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 boom. And I'm thinking, holy F, I'm going to die. And I'm getting dizzy and I'm sweating. I go in the shower. It doesn't help.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm really thinking I'm going to die. And I called my younger brother, Jeff, and he said, bite the bullet, call 911 before you do.
Yeah.
And
probably good advice.
It was good advice. But okay, my life is over, right? If I call 911, it's out in the open. And you know what? That might have changed the course of my life. If I actually called 911 and that marriage would have survived it, but it might have changed the course of my life, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that's not what I did. You know what I did? We had these leftover bottles of Cristal from our wedding. I thought alcohol's a depressant. No one knew that better than me.
Mm-hmm.
I chugged the bottle of Cristal. That's what I did. I chugged the bottle of Cristal.
That thinned your blood a little bit, right?
Yeah. And right before I'm about to dial 911, my heart goes back into regular rhythm. My heart converts to regular rhythm.
Fascinating.
Now I'm hammered. And my wife's coming home in 3 hours. And I crouched down crying, thinking, I've dodged this bullet. Thank God I'm alive.
Yeah.
And I shower, I mouthwash, and I go in bed like nothing never happened. You know, and my wife was out. She comes home and she's out, right? So she wakes up, I'm hungover. I do put on the best act I can by the time I get up. And she never knew until I wrote my book. I don't know if she ever read that book, but I wrote The Addicted Lawyer when I talked about that story.
Great book, by the way.
Yeah, thank you. She never knew. So that's how it impacted my marriages. I failed the Texas bar 3 times as drugs and alcohol.
So all the schooling you did
Yeah.
was for nothing up until this point.
First time I took the Texas bar exam, my study aides the weekend before the exam in a roach-infested motel were an 8-ball of cocaine, a fifth of Jack Daniels, and a liter of Tab.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
No wonder you didn't pass.
No wonder I didn't pass. When I got the letter, it wasn't like I was expecting it.
Yeah.
And that is how I practice law, as a drunk and as addicted to cocaine.
What part of law did you practice?
I became a personal injury lawyer.
Okay.
And I was Saul, for those who understand the reference, I was literally
Better Call Saul.
Saul Goodman without the drug cartels. That was the only difference. Saul Goodman without the drug cartels. I was willing to do everything and anything that would get me money to buy more cocaine.
I appreciate the honesty there. This segment of the Pull Podcast is brought to you by Creekside Recovery.
I had this, I call it a ring of chiropractors out in the suburbs outside of Dallas. And back then we used beepers, right? I had beepers and a roll of quarters.
Mm-hmm.
Back in the dinosaur age, you had pay phones, you got a beep and you had to call back on a payphone at a 7-Eleven or wherever. So I would get a beep, I would call on the payphone, and it would be one of my chiropractors said, Brian, we have a fish. And that's how she referred to it, somebody, a potential client. So I would drive out to this chiropractor's office, and I'd sit in the lobby with my college graduation suit, my scuff shoes, my briefcase that had contracts in it. We call them contingency agreements. Take a third of the settlement.
Mm-hmm.
Unless we go to court, then it's a fourth. And she would come out with the potential client and put on her act. Mr. Cuban, what are you doing here? Mr. Cuban is our top lawyer. Mr. Cuban will sell you down the river, to settle your case. Mr. Cuban will go to trial if he has to. Mr. Cuban doesn't want to walk into a courtroom. Mr. Cuban will sell you out. And that is how I practice law. I'm not proud of it. I'm very lucky to have not had my license yanked. There is nothing I can do about it, but I try to make living amends for that,
Mm-hmm.
right, by how I live now.
Yeah, of course.
And so I'm not proud of what I did, but that's how I practice law.
I think that's a good snapshot into, because you hear about these things, right? And like the past is something that we can't change. And anybody that deals with addiction and alcoholism knows that we're not proud of the things that we've done. And we probably weren't raised to do those types of things. And had we not been under the influence or in some way, shape, or form influenced by the drugs or alcohol, we wouldn't have been doing those types of things.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Because, the Brian, the real Brian was just this shy young man, right? Just this shy young man. And the Brian, he became was this creation, this monster.
Mm-hmm.
But the monster gets around. The monster, I became the biggest douchebag on the Dallas party circuit. And it got even worse when my brother became famous. Oh, we can talk about that. That was awful. But
I'll need a couple stories at least.
Yeah. And so I finally, through the 90s and failed marriages, it gets around, and I finally lost my career as a lawyer. I went to jail for DWI. I had no money. And my brother Mark bought the Dallas Mavericks. I remember I ran into him at a health club at the gym, and he was asking me how things are going, and I was saying not too good. And I was going through now severe depression. And he calls me over. This was late in 99. He goes, Brian, don't tell anyone. Or no, this was actually early December. This was December 99. He goes, Brian, don't tell anyone. I go, what? But I bought the Dallas Mavericks. You'll come work for me. So don't worry about it. And in 2000, New Year, they made the announcement that he had bought the Dallas Mavericks. And so I went to work with Mark.
Yeah, that's exciting.
For Mark. Well, I went to work for Mark as a coke addict, and again, I hate that term, but alcoholic, and those two things. So I was not the best employee, but now I'm working for my brother. And he put me to work for him when they were building the American Airlines Center, the arena we play in now, because Mark owned half of it. And I was sitting in this construction trailer with some of the most important people in Dallas as they're going over plans and this and that. And I didn't know anything about construction, but Mark was just trying to give me responsibility to kind of pull me out, right? because it's clear I'm struggling.
Yeah.
And that's not how addiction works either. I was showing up to these meetings under the influence, just like I showed up to final exams and classes. And so he had to pull me out of that. And now, here's where privilege comes in. Addiction doesn't discriminate.
No, it doesn't.
But access to resources does. Can, based on privilege, right? Whether you have insurance or this or that.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a lot of privilege, tons of privilege, because I had a billionaire brother who loved me dearly and a younger brother who loved me dearly, didn't want to see me dead, didn't want to see me living under a bridge. And so I fully acknowledge that, but it was my life. Right?
Sure.
And so I stayed working for Mark while he paid me a salary. And I really wasn't doing much. I did what I can. He put me in charge of his foundation, which was the Fallen Patriot Fund, where we provided grants to disabled soldiers of Operation Iraqi Freedom.
That's awesome.
And I was I ran that, and I did that well.
That must have been fulfilling,
and it was fulfilling,
Yeah.
even as I was struggling with addiction.
Sure.
And I ran that, and we gave over $5 million in grants.
Incredible.
So I did that. My level of functioning was not high.
Yeah, and getting worse probably,
And
right?
getting worse and worse and worse. And when Mark became famous, all of a sudden, I could walk into any bar in Dallas, bypass the line. I was getting free drugs. I was getting free drinks. I could date girls half my age, right? And it was always, those relationships always revolved around drugs, cocaine.
Of course.
To someone half your age, why else would you date someone twice your age?
Right.
In my mind, I had become this, I had no sense of self.
Mm-hmm.
When Mark became internationally famous, I had no sense of self. The real Brian was this person who thought he was a fat pig, and the only way he could be something else was to use substances. But those substances had started to stop working to be something else. So how can I decided I can be Mark Cuban's brother. And if I'm Mark Cuban's brother, I get all this fake adulation and all these things, all these benefits, and I could say, ooh, okay, I'm somebody. But none of that was based on who Brian really was.
Well, I hear about that all the time from people. They always talk about being uncomfortable in their own skin, at least addicts and alcoholics. And you hear it in the rooms and people talking and saying the facades that we put on and what we try to personify out there and what we present to people is something that we want them to see or what we think they'll like, rather than being authentic in who we are, right?
And for me, I only wanted to be the person that got me the dates, that got me, that made me think people like me for who I am. It was always revolved around for what I would give them, or they loved me until the cocaine ran out. That's who I became. And to give you the best example of this, just how insane it got, right?
In the quiet hills of Marin County, there's a place where healing begins. A place where alcohol or drugs no longer control your life. At Live Oaks Wellness, we offer compassionate, client-centered care for those struggling with addiction. Our licensed drug and alcohol detox and residential programs are designed to help you take the first step toward recovery with a team that truly understands the journey. You don't have to walk this path alone. At Live Oaks, we're here to help you rebuild, restore, and reclaim your life. Take the first step today. Live Oaks Wellness. Healing starts here.
In the summer of 2006, the Dallas Mavericks were finally going to the finals for the very first time.
Yeah.
Against the Miami Heat.
Dirk Nowitzki and Jason Kidd.
We lost that one. Boo. But as you might imagine, I was going to get some pretty good seats for those games, right?
Of
From
course.
my brother.
Yeah.
I also had the opportunity to get a couple tickets for friends. And I called my brother and I got 2 more tickets, great seats. And I didn't give them to my friends. I didn't sell them on eBay. I called my drug dealer. I said, I'll trade you these 2 tickets for some cocaine.
How much were those tickets going for back then? Like $500 a piece?
They were going for about $500 a piece because these were good seats.
Oh, and I imagine they were probably, if you were to try to sell them on any other outlet, it could have gone for more because of the scarcity of tickets at that time.
Yeah. And so it wasn't about the money. I wanted the blow.
Yeah.
And so My drug dealer says, sure. And so he comes over. I was high class. He delivered. That guy delivered all my stashes.
At that point now, all of a sudden,
yeah. And so, because I was Ryan Cuban, got to have delivered to me. Oh, God.
I'm not leaving my house to get drugs.
God, was I a douchebag.
Yeah.
But so he comes over. I give him the tickets. And he hands me the giant Ziploc baggie. And I go running up to my home office, dump it out on the desk like I'm Scarface. And looking at my cocaine kingdom. And I line it out because I had to do some. And again, it's funny with the dollar bill, But cocaine now had long stopped giving me that love and confidence.
You're just chasing that first time.
I'm just chasing it. At this point, I'm just chasing it.
Yeah, I know that.
And it was never about having a problem. It was never about, do I need to go into treatment? Do I need 12-step? It was about, if this stash isn't any good, I'm finding another dealer who delivers.
Sure.
And so...
It's dependence.
Yes. I line it out and bad high, just sucked, paranoia. And so my solution, I put it all back in the Ziploc baggie. I hide it in a closet. I drive to a Home Depot about a mile away where I buy electrical faceplate outlets, a drill, and a saw. I drive back to my house. I go to the bedroom closets, to the drywall with the drill and the saw, and cut these rectangular holes.
Nice. You're getting weird.
I am getting weird. And you know how I knew about this? Back flying, they had, do you remember Sky Mall magazine?
Of course.
So in the back of Sky Mall magazine, they had these fake electrical outlets where you can pull it out to hide. I don't think they intended cocaine.
No.
But you could hide your valuables and stuff, and it would pull out, right? A little slot. And I remembered that. So I decided to create my own. And I cut the outlets and I put the cocaine in separate Ziploc baggies and I drop it into the drywall.
Sounds like you might have had a little bit of meth in that batch.
Maybe. Could have been. I seal it up with the faceplates, thinking I'm the smartest lawyer ever. Like the DEA, the cops, and the drug dogs have never thought of that one before.
So at that point, you actually think that the DEA's onto you or something? Like the purpose of this is because...
No, it just shows, I'm just paranoid.
Yeah,
and I'm just paranoid.
You also don't want somebody to come in and take the last of your stash.
It was more that, because my house was Grand Central Station for parties and things like that. I didn't want people to find my stash because I had my stash stolen before at a party.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
the dealer took the tickets. I imagine there were multiple games, right?
There were multiple games, but about an hour later, I did another line. Now just a bad high again. I go back to that same electrical outlet, and now I'm supposed to leave for the game. I take that cocaine, I put it back in the Ziploc baggie, I go to my master bathroom, and I flush it down the toilet. Flush it all. Well, now it's like 900 worth right down the toilet.
What's your thought process in that moment?
I was paranoid and disgusted with myself.
You just didn't want to, because you'd do it again if you had it.
In the back of my mind, I knew that I would never make the game. I was going to do every bit of that cocaine till I got the high that I wanted. And within an hour, that cocaine was going to be gone. And
you'd probably be dead.
And the only solution I could think of was to flush it down the toilet.
It was almost an act of preservation.
It was an act of preservation. But you know what that tells you is that I'm starting to get into the mindset of this is bad.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. You're starting to recognize that even you are scaring yourself.
Starting to centipede into the stages of change. Mm-hmm. The 5 of them. The first one.
Yeah. Pre-contemplation.
Yeah. So the next morning when it's in my rearview mirror, I wake up and I'm staring at the ceiling. What did you do? What did you do?
Because now you need cocaine again.
Yes.
Yeah.
You're an idiot. And you flushed it down the toilet. There are more games. So I called my drug dealer again. And this time now I wait till midday, right? Call the drug dealer again. He shows up at my house later, 3 hours later, whatever. Said, dude, you did all that last night? It actually wasn't a lot, right? I've known people who've gone through 5 8 balls, in a night. And I said, Yeah, I did. Yeah, I didn't want to tell him I flushed down the toilet like a moron. He said, okay, here you go. Gave him 2 more tickets. Rinse, wash, repeat. I go back up to my home office, and now it's like maybe 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Line them out. Snort them.
Paranoia.
Snort some more, not getting it. Snort some more, not getting it. Paranoia. Hide them behind the electrical outlets again. Now, maybe another hour later or so, go back to those same electrical outlets. Second night in a row, go back to that bathroom where I dropped to my knees so many times with bulimia, retching and praying and crying and hoping something or someone would take away the pain, and flushed it again. It's crazy.
It's the definition of insanity.
Yeah, doing the same thing over and over the same way and expecting a different result.
Exactly.
They call it the insanity of addiction, but we know it's not insane, right? It's a biological brain-based process that affects so many of us, our loved ones, our children, or ourselves, and takes so many of us from this earth. And that would have been the high point of the most insane thing, in the whole time, jail and all that stuff. But I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready.
So fast forward to the part where you are.
January 2006, which was before the cocaine tickets. My girlfriend didn't know about this incident. And I had met this girl at this bar. I was all coked up. She didn't do drugs. She had come in for the first time. And somehow I was able to convince her that I was this respectable lawyer, blah, 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 blah. And
sounds good.
Yeah, wear my Phantom of the Opera mask, the last one I had, right? That I'm this respectable person. I call them the Phantom of the Opera mask we wear.
I love that.
That gets harder and harder.
Yeah.
To convince the outside world that
people start to know who. Yeah, they start to see
who we really are.
Yep.
And so we started dating. She moved in with me. Easter weekend, 2007, and I was getting away with it. How could you get away with it? Well, I had a JD in law, but I had a PhD in BS, and then camouflage, right? That's how you get. The whole world is about lying.
That's it. Your whole world is a lie at that point.
A lie. So you get good at it.
You get very good.
Get very good at it. She goes away to visit her parents for the weekend, who live out of Dallas and Houston. I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to go out. It was a buddy's bachelor party. I'm going to go out and I'm going to party, have a good time. She's coming back Sunday evening. This is Friday. By the time she gets back, I'll be in bed, showered, all good. She'll never know. She leaves, I go out. Next thing I know, it's Sunday afternoon. She's staring down at me. There's cocaine spread out over the dresser. There's black market Xanax because I'd been cocaining through the night and using Xanax as well. Not uncommon, or sleeping pills, right? Not uncommon.
Come down.
Yeah. And
you got to sleep sometime.
Yeah. Makes it very hard to practice law and work.
Well, it sounds like you were in a blackout. Yeah.
Had a blackout. She's a lawyer. She's trying to figure out, I'm sure, if she walked in the right house. I'm looking around, getting my bearings, trying to figure out how I can explain, first, what day is it? And how I can explain this Law and Order episode, orgy of evidence, that I just might not be the person I represented myself to be.
I don't think there's a liar in the world that could get away with that one.
No. All I could think about was the kind of metaphorical running home to mama. I said, take me back to blank. And I named the psychiatric facility where my brothers took me in 2005 when I decided to end my life by suicide. And that was very close because I had a .45 automatic on my nightstand when they came in at the urging of a friend.
Wow.
And if we have time, we can talk about that. But
no, we have all the time in the world. Yeah, by all means. I mean, if you want to get into it, please do. I mean, I think it's pertinent to the story. And listen, I think it's what a lot of people experience, right? Because it sounds like these moments are starting to get closer and closer together.
Yeah. Well, in 2005, my brothers, I had become hopeless, right? I mean, as I'd said, I'm coming to the end of this. I've long come to the end of where cocaine and drugs.
They stopped working at this point.
They stopped working. And now I just hate myself. All I see is a black hole. I see no chance of ever being anyone that I would love, let alone anyone else. Failed marriages and this and that. And I was a black, in my mind, the Cubans would be better off without me, right? A permanent solution to a temporary problem.
Yeah.
And so I decided to end my life by suicide in the summer of 2005. And this was before I met Amanda, obviously. And it was close. It was really close. At the urging of a friend who I dedicated my first book to, Shattered Image, who I'd sent a disturbing email to, my brothers came into my house. Jeff came in first. Mark flew in from LA. Jeff took the weapon, cleaned up the house. Mark came in and they dragged me kicking and screaming down to the psychiatric facility, kicking and screaming. They're trying to save my life. My brothers who love me dearly. And all I can think of was, leave me the F alone.
Yeah.
Get out of my life. Let me go back to the people who truly care about me, at least until the blow and alcohol run out. Right?
Fascinating.
Yeah. And they weren't having any of it. And again, privilege, where we're in the psychiatric facility waiting for intake. We go back into the room and I'm screaming at Mark, screaming at him, blaming him for everything, his fame, blaming everyone but myself, right? It's your fault. You don't know what it's like. It's not Mark's responsibility for me to have my own sense of self, for me to be my own person.
Right.
It's not his responsibility. And making everyone take responsibility for what I had become, except Brian.
Well, the fascinating thing about that, and at least when you're talking, what I'm thinking about is it's like your disease's last ditch efforts to try to continue to keep you isolated.
Yeah.
At this point, it's like your disease is so ingrained in you and so alive that it manifests these feelings inside of you that are not accurate.
Yeah.
You have to place blame, whatever.
Absolutely. Projection at its finest.
It is flailing.
Yeah. And we see that all the time in families.
We sure
Classic
do.
projection. And so they weren't having any of it, obviously. And they were trying to put a psychiatric hold on me. And being a lawyer in Texas, it's just like California, I believe, are you in immediate danger to yourself or others, right? And I knew, they're not doing that to me. So on a dime, I switched.
It was a big overreaction. I'm okay now.
I wasn't going to use the weapon.
Right.
Blah, blah, blah. So much to the chagrin of my brothers, the psychiatrist said, I can't sign off. I can't just sign off for the hell of it, right? We have standards in Texas.
Yep.
And so they took me back home, took my car keys and said, stay in your house for 2 weeks. Everything's going to be okay. And my thought is, well, I had a few thoughts there. No problem. My drug dealer delivers. They're coming. The party will come to me. And it did. 2, they're not telling me what to do. I took a cab to get a new set of car keys immediately after they left. And 3, now they know. Now it's in their face. So what am I going to do? Am I going to go to treatment? Nah. Am I going to go to 12-step? Nah. I'm going to distance myself from my family. Because since they know, I'm not going to allow them to alter, what I have become and what has got, and if I allow them in my life, they are going to force me to do this. And it's going to be battles. And I wanted the path of least resistance. And so I started distancing from my family, from my father, from my nieces and nephews.
So there must have been something else going on, though, because if you were suicidal back in 2005 there, and then you get taken to the psych ward, was it the act of being put in the psych ward that has stopped you from saying, okay, I just need to stop telling people I'm going to kill myself? Or did you still have those thoughts going on in your head at the time?
No. It came and went. It came on really fast. And I do a lot of talking about suicide and suicidal ideation because families searching for answers, it comes on so fast. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people don't understand that. There's a lot of guilt in families. If we would have done this, if I'd have been there, but it comes on and you can't be right there all the time, right? No. I was very fortunate.
Because you were ready to go with that 45.
I was ready to go.
Yeah.
I was ready to go. The funny thing is, I've had suicidal thoughts since, but in sobriety, because I also struggle with intense depression, which I'm still in therapy for. These things exist and do exist independently. They can be intertwined and they can exist independently.
But without the drugs and alcohol in your system, inherently, or at least you probably know that it's not a good thing. Like the thought's there, but you know it's not necessarily something that is a solution.
I had a toolbox to deal with it.
Right.
I had a therapy.
But when you're under the influence, it sounds like a great idea.
Yeah, and there is no toolbox.
Right. This segment of the Pull Podcast is brought to you by Golden Gate Recovery.
My toolbox was more cocaine and more, just that one more thing, so I don't have to feel and just do it.
Wild.
Just go with it.
Wild.
Yeah. And so, no, I just brought the party to me.
Yep.
And then fast forward back to meeting Amanda and the blackout. She takes me down in the same psychiatric facility. She's crying, standing there now for the second time in my life, the parking lot. She's crying, and I'm thinking she's gone. This was Easter weekend, 2007. Mm-hmm. And I'd go, right? I'd go. I mean, why would she want to be with me? We had been dating about a year. And, just over a year. Why would she want to stay with that? She stood by me. And we dated over a decade.
God bless her.
Well, I rebuilt the broken trust in 12-step in counseling. And now we've been together going on 20 years.
Congratulations.
And so not all relationships will survive that.
No.
But ours was able to, because one, she's a saint, and two, though, because I did the work.
Yeah.
Right? And I did the work for me.
Yeah.
Not for her, not for anyone else, because spouses leave. Pets die. Parents die. Trauma happens.
Life happens.
Life happens. I remember my first month in the rooms. Somebody was in the room talking about losing their dog. And I turned to my sponsor and say, and I had a beagle, if that happens to me, I'll never make it. He said, when your recovery is strong enough, you will. You won't have that thought, right? And I didn't understand what he meant. But obviously, as time grew on,
you do now.
I do now.
Mm-hmm.
And so in that parking lot, the last thing, I thought that there wouldn't be a third trip back because I'd be dead.
Yep.
And I thought about my father. My father, who was the greatest generation. My father, who fought in the Battle of Okinawa. He was a Seabee and fought in Korea.
Wow.
My father, just old school, ran a trim shop, just reupholstered car seats.
Mm-hmm.
Worked on his knees.
But hardworking.
Hardworking man. The middle of three boys like me. Worked with his older brother. They had that trim shop just a mile or so from where we lived, from the end of the Korean War till his brother passed away in 1999. It was like a bad marriage sometimes, but they were together.
Yeah.
And my father would say to Mark, Jeff, and I all the time, guys, no matter where you go, no matter where life takes you, whether it's across the state, across the country, across the world, you pick up that phone. You see how your brother is doing. You tell your brother you love him.
I love that. This
is the relationship he had with his brothers. This is the relationship when I am here in Sausalito, and I will go and see his 90-year-old brother, the last surviving brother, because we are that close.
Yeah.
Who lives in Palo Alto, because of what my father passed down to us.
Yeah, that's great.
And I thought of that in the parking lot. And I didn't want to lose that gift, the gift of family, the gift that he passed down, because my brothers wouldn't stop loving me, be it family's distance. I had distance. They had enough, right? They had finally got it. This wasn't their battle. It had to be mine. I had to be ready.
But people were putting up boundaries at this point.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And so I decided I was finally ready. Why then and not in 2005? We talked about that. We talked about this, beforehand. Whatever triggered the trigger for recovery, at one time in life can be totally different at another time in life.
Absolutely.
I wish I knew that. Why? If I could figure that out, I'd win a Nobel Prize for recovery, right? For addiction.
You probably have it all figured out by then. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I decided I was ready. So the next day, I walked into the rooms of 12-step. I was also seeing a psychiatrist, and I wasn't given treatment as an option. I was only given 12-step. I remember when I walked into his office, and I'd been lying to him. Well, why would you lie to your therapist? Well, shame knows no hourly rate.
Honestly, right? Yeah.
And so he says, will you consider 12-step? First he said, "Will you consider?" I said, "I can't go." First he said 12 steps. I said, "I can't go." "Well, why not?" "Doctor, I see them outside smoking. Secondhand smoke will kill you."
But too much cocaine would.
Yeah. I literally said that to him. I can't secondhand smoke.
Hilarious.
Right? The mind working in weird ways.
Well, you're arguing your point, right?
Yeah.
And why you don't want to do something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I knew I had to show my brother. I rent because I had to show my family something.
Mm-hmm. You got to get them off your back.
And I had to wanted to show my now wife something because she moved out the next day.
So would you say in this moment your intentions weren't 100% pure?
I would say I was starting to settle into the first stage of change. Okay. So I walked into the room after doing a couple fake walks where I'd see someone I knew. I walked in there and half of them were lawyers I knew. And I sat down in that chair. I remember it was red. And it was uncomfortable. And I'm crying, sitting in the corner. I'm sweating bullets.
Of course.
And
detoxing.
Yeah, I'm detoxing. And I remember thinking when I sat down in that chair, not that I was an alcoholic, nothing like that. You know what I was thinking?
I am curious.
If sitting in this chair will allow me, for the first time in my life, to wake up in the morning, walk to the mirror, birthday suit naked, look at myself, and love myself without the aid of cocaine or alcohol, I will sit in this chair.
Yeah,
that's what I was thinking.
That's awesome. So it sounds like you almost had some hope at that point. You were like, this may be my opportunity, right?
I had no hope. It was, they said
But you were still thinking, what if, right?
Yeah. And it was, there was nothing left of I was broken down to just the skeleton.
Sure.
I was just, there was nothing. So I was willing to try anything.
I was going to say, they have that term, sick and tired of being sick and tired.
Yeah. That's, some of the cliches are true.
The jumping off place.
Yeah. Some of the cliches are true. And I was willing to try anything.
Well, that's great.
And so I sat and I rebuilt recovery. I found my joy. I found Brian, got comfortable with who I am. I never wanted to be a lawyer. I walked away from that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I still sit today. I still sit in that chair. Sometimes that same chair.
That's amazing. Almost 20 years later?
Yeah.
Or 18?
Yeah, I have 18 and a half years.
Congratulations.
Yeah, sometimes it's that same chair.
Yeah.
It's those same chairs.
In a Texas room, right?
In a Texas room.
Yeah. Cool. Wow. That's amazing. Out of curiosity, because I want to go back to the point where, the first 30, 60, and 90 days, because the people that are listening to this podcast most likely are either people that are at that jumping off place or that sick and tired of being sick and tired of place, or if we reach somebody, hopefully it's at that moment, right, where they see this and they get inspired, right?
Sure.
And so I really want to go back to your first 30, 60, and 90 days. If you could go through some of that with me, where you're sitting in that chair. Yeah, I get the point that you're detoxing and stuff, but at what point do you start to see a little bit of motion and start seeing a little bit of...
My first 30 days were combative.
Okay.
In 12-step.
Sure.
It just interestingly, I remember after my first meeting, I texted my brothers. I went. All they said was, "Good, keep it up." Right? They had realized there's nothing. It was for me. That
Right.
was the only response from my brothers. "Good, keep it up."
Yeah, you're also not going to get too big of a pat on the back for doing what you're supposed to do,
Yeah,
right?
they really didn't know what I was supposed to do. They knew AA. They knew 12-step.
They knew it wasn't drugs and alcohol, and that's good.
Yeah. So, excuse me for violating that tradition.
Oh, my apologies too. Yeah, no big deal. I mean, as long as it's a personal, it's like we don't speak for them, right?
Yeah. So the first 30 days were very combative because I'm Jewish and my parents were not religious. Okay, so I've grown to be almost, I call it humanist, right? I believe in spirituality, but I was never big on anything on prayers and ritual. I believe that if you do the next right thing, you help people, whatever happens, whatever there, should be okay, right? If you live your life as a good person and try to help people.
Altruism.
Yeah, that is, how I live my life. I got into this situation and where I was going to this more early meetings, the early morning meeting, which was more fundamentalist, right? which was, you got to do this and this and this. And it was
big book thumpers.
yeah. It was much more into the big book, which is fine. Unless you're trying to push it on someone who still has to figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
I remember I went to breakfast with this group of people coming out of this much more strict early morning meeting. And I was very combative about this, whole higher power thing at that point. The guy leans over to me. It's a judge. He leans over to me, a former judge. Brian, I know, you're fighting it. You're fighting it. In his gravelly voice. And let me tell you something. It can be anything you want. It can be, and I hate the doorknob thing, but he actually said doorknob. It can be a doorknob or whatever. And, or you're a lawyer, just say otherwise known as.
That's hilarious.
And are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Am I on candid camera? It's
But you didn't leave.
I didn't leave. I switched meetings.
Okay.
I switched to the noon meeting, which was more progressive and which is a younger crowd. And so I went back. My sponsor, who is still my sponsor to this day,
amazing,
was very, what works for you, but if you're struggling, we'll talk about it, right? And my feedback will always be from the big book and things like that, but we'll talk about it. If it's working for you, I'm not going to say don't do that. I went back to him and he said, everyone in here is getting sober their own way, and that's how it is. He said, people here, it's all different personalities, and that's how it is. If you're not comfortable, find another meeting, but keep coming back.
Yeah. And then just, you don't have to worry about that step necessarily with the whole God thing right away. Just do the rest of them and then talk to me after.
Yeah. And so that's what I did. That's what I did. And so I went to, it wasn't just 90 meetings, it was 120 meetings in 90 days, because that was very important to me, because I was alone. My girlfriend had moved out, and I felt really alone. And everyone knows what that first 30, 90 days, you know what that first 30, 90 days was. Because you can go through all the rituals of throwing away all the bottles and the, and the glasses and all that stuff, and change your phone. But I knew my dealer's number, right?
Yeah.
I knew my dealer's number. And so there's that pull.
That's interesting you said that. That's why we call it that.
Yeah.
The pull.
There is that pull where you want to go back to that life.
There is.
Where you feel you will never be loved again. You will never have a friend again. You will never be able to socialize normally again. And so why not just make that call?
Yeah.
It was very important to me to stay close. And my father, God bless him, turned out to be a big part of that the first week. My late father. I had never told him anything. I didn't want to disappoint my father.
Of course not.
But I had been in 12-step for a week, and I was white knuckling, and the pull was real, right? And I was close. I go over to my father, and I'm still doing all the meetings, but I felt just so alone, so alone. And I didn't feel comfortable enough, to really converse with anyone in the meetings about anything. And so I knock on my father's door. He lived literally across the street from me.
Okay.
And if you want to know how my father's gift gave a family, Mark, Jeff, and I live walking distance to each other.
I love that.
All these decades later, 1,200 miles from Pittsburgh, we live walking distance to each other.
That's great.
And so I go over to my father's house, knock on the door. He says, come on in. I sit down on the couch, and I finally start, I cry, and he's, what's going on? And I tell him, and I'm unloading so much for it at that time, an early 80s guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
He didn't understand cocaine and, and all that stuff. He's the greatest generation. And
pull yourself up by your bootstraps.
he didn't say that. You know what he said? He said, moving with me for as long as it takes. We'll get through this together.
That's amazing.
I love you.
That's amazing.
And I was that 13-year-old boy who wanted to tell his father about the bullying and all the stuff, but was always afraid to. Finally telling them and getting the answer he would have gotten at 13 years old.
That must have been a huge exhale.
It was. And so I did. I moved in with him for a period of time.
You went back to Pittsburgh.
No, he's in Dallas now. Lived across the street from me.
Oh, okay. All right. I
Yeah.
missed that part.
Yeah.
I didn't realize he was already, okay.
Yeah,
so,
he was already in Dallas.
amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, my parents moved down to Dallas when Mark struck it big and moved in there. You know, he was part of saving my life. My brother's 12-step, my father, and all that stuff. Saving my life.
I remember the first 30, 60, 90 days for me, I wasn't even looking at the world in the eyes yet, right? I couldn't even make eye contact with anybody for a while. I remember going to the rooms and wanting to stand by the door in case too many people approached me. I was so unsure of what I was doing there that I needed an exit plan just in case. And but you almost knew that you had to be there. There's something about those rooms that are magical.
It was. In the rooms, as I struggled my first, 30, 60, 90 days, I still struggling to be the Brian who I wanted to make sure everyone in that room, if I could work it in, without saying my name, that I was Mark Cuban's brother.
Yeah, of course. Right? At that point, it's still part of your persona.
The ego is still there. The ego is still there because I needed to feel good about myself. And so I wanted people to know. And you see the other people rolling their eyes, and so that was, That was my coping mechanism.
Well, that's the whole part. That's a perfect picture, in my opinion, of how you identified with yourself until you go through the process of doing the 12-step work, right? And then getting to actually find who you are and becoming your own person again.
Yeah, and it was hard. Those first the detox, because I didn't go to detox. I wouldn't recommend that for anyone. What I did,
that's dangerous.
That was dangerous because it wasn't just cocaine; it was Xanax and sleeping pills. That is, there is a fatality rate for that. And so I realized that I've, again, privileged, but with health insurance and things, but, that is a Russian roulette thing. And so I remember that as I got to my got into the 90s, I was really starting to get a little bit better about the book, the big book, and getting more comfortable with my sponsor. And,
people's names were becoming familiar.
And people, learning to have dialogue and learning to share.
Yeah.
I started to share. That also, the sharing in 12-step also helped me in sharing in therapy. Right? Because 12-step is for the alcohol part. Healing 12-year-old Brian is the therapy part.
Sure.
Right?
Inner child stuff.
But I was always going to be susceptible to a relapse until I healed that little boy. Because I had to heal the little boy who had that horrible trauma to heal the big boy who was trying to learn from that little boy.
Interesting. I'm having a little moment of self-reflection here too, because approximately 9-10 years of sobriety, I started going back to therapy to try to do some of that stuff too.
I've been in therapy for maybe 16 years or so.
Yeah.
I still people ask me what my biggest struggle is. Well, it's not blow, because I don't hang around people. But I'll tell you what, I know myself well enough to know that if that was put there in front of me, I would probably have a physical reaction.
Yeah, visceral
reaction. So I, would never put myself in that situation, obviously.
Of course not.
But and then now alcohol is now background noise, right? I'm around people who drink, and my girlfriend have a glass, margarita at Mexican food or whatever. That's background noise to me. After 18 plus years, but cocaine, I would have a physical reaction.
Sobriety's been fun then.
It's been a journey. So life in sobriety and life as I continue to find myself and continue to learn is still an open book, right? It's still an open book. And I have accomplished things in my years of sobriety that I never would have dreamed and I didn't want in my years of active addiction. I didn't want it, You would have asked me, what are you talking about? You've written books. I don't want to write books. I want the next party.
Right.
Yeah, I don't want this. I don't want that. So my mind wasn't even wired to be able to contemplate those things.
This segment of the Pull Podcast is brought to you by Immersive Recovery. So good. I love the way you put that, because I always talk about that with all the guests that come on here. I believe that getting sober is like a superpower. And as a result of removing that, and sometimes I think it's a combination of that as well as an ego death, and then also experiencing something so painful that the growth that comes from that.
You learn.
It creates this person that is almost, I don't want to say unbeatable, but we've already dealt with some of the hardest things that people have ever had to deal with and that somebody could go through. What else is there? It seems like we're limitless.
Yeah. I mean, everyone has, we have the road, at least I had the road of addiction that who knows? I mean, I think that probably, you don't know, would have led to my not being here because I'd be dead.
Mm-hmm.
And and now the road of recovery is still open. I have no idea what I'll be doing a year from now in terms of, writing or anything.
But isn't that exciting?
Yeah, it is. But I know this, I'll probably, they say it's one day at a time, but I'm comfortable that I'll probably be sober.
Yeah.
I'm comfortable because I have the toolbox. No guarantees in life, but I have the toolbox to say there's a good chance, right, that I will probably still be, learning my recovery.
Well, funny thing, and I didn't mention it, but I'm a middle child. I'm also from Philadelphia. And then I also have a younger brother and older sister. So 3 siblings still. And talking about, similarities versus the differences. When we were getting into the rooms and those first 30 days, you were probably like, I got nothing in common with these people, right?
I was so embarrassed with myself. So ashamed. It's funny. I'm sitting in the room. It was the first week. And I vividly remember listening to stories. And I hear one story, you go, that's nothing. I hear another story, ooh, that's bad. Yeah, you'd be here. And I hear another story, yeah, okay. Yeah, comparing stories. And I remember comparing stories.
Of course.
A lot of stories to myself. And I wasn't thinking that I had nothing in common. I was thinking that no one could be more ashamed than I am. That's the way I would characterize it. No one in this room could have more shame than I do, and which would be on, how would I know that?
Yeah, right? I think it's all relative too.
It's all relative. Yeah, of course people have shame. And that's one thing when I talk to people, I always try to not say, don't be ashamed, because I feel like I'm invalidating a normal reaction. Shame is normal. Of course you're ashamed. It's a normal response.
It would be weird if you weren't.
It would be weird if you weren't.
Yeah.
That's right. So people say, I hear that, don't be ashamed, don't be ashamed. We all go through it. No, it's a normal physical response, shame. I get that you're ashamed. I'd be ashamed too.
It's good. You're not a sociopath.
You're human.
Yeah.
Right? So what are we going to do about it? Right? What's the next step? That's what I go to. Shame is normal. What's the next step?
Let's get into the solution.
Yeah, let's get to the solution. So I'm always very careful about that, not to say don't be ashamed.
No, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, you do want to not have them dwell in it. I get that you feel shameful, but in my experience, there's a way to come back.
Let's move forward.
That. Yeah.
You're feeling it. Feel it. Let's move forward.
Yeah.
What's the next step?
Use it as drive.
Yeah. And so, I remember in the rooms thinking no one could be more ashamed than I am. Mm-hmm. No one is more of a worthless loser in this room than I am.
Which technically couldn't be true, right? Because we were talking about it being relative.
It's all relative.
It could be somebody that, drove drunk with their kids in the car that feels lower than whale shit, but another person that just grabbed $1 from his mom's purse.
Or somebody who wiped out a family.
Or somebody that killed somebody.
Yeah, you just don't know. And
don't.
But I'm still, at that point in the rooms, I'm still about me.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
So I'm still wrapped up in Brian.
Most people get to AA and they're like, oh, I'm not as bad as those people. I remember getting to AA and thinking they're not even close to my caliber of alcoholic. Yeah. Like I'm putting down a handle and a half. Yeah. These people are talking about 2 bottles of wine.
And I was also struggling with privilege.
Sure.
When I walked into that room because, these people are going to look at me and say, what do you have to be ashamed about? Right? Why, would say, why are you here? I'm projecting, you have this, you have that, you've had that. How,
But none of it was true.
That's
the best part is it's a lot of love in those rooms.
Yeah. And none of it was true, but I was projecting out, like I get in social media a lot because I speak out and you just let it roll off you. Mm-hmm. What are you, you got this and that, you don't understand. And then, but I felt that way. I was like, how could anyone understand or why should I even be here when I have all of this privilege?
And that's a completely normal thought.
Yeah.
That's a completely normal thought. And I think there's probably a lot of people that struggle with it. I think that's the whole purpose of being, having this and using it as a platform. I applaud people like you that have that platform that still want to use it to this day to get vulnerable, because it's a brave act. But ultimately, you're doing it to hopefully save somebody else, right?
And you're doing it to break stigma too, because there's still a lot of stigma out there. I'm very active in social media, and I love that. And I, on many topics that some are controversial around recovery. A day doesn't go by where I'll get someone call me, say, you're Fredo, or, because of the older brother, call me Fredo or this or that. Why should we fund Narcan and this and that? And so they go I've learned you just got to let it roll off, right?
You do.
You just got to let it roll off, because there'll be another person you educate that says,
if you've helped one person, then it became worth it.
Yeah,
right?
Help one person. I call it the cogs of mental health wellness, right? The first cog, you help the first cog. They help the second cog. They help the third. And you may be down 6 people and someone went into recovery and it started with you. And you'll never know. But you saved a life. You changed a life.
Well, that's why I love doing this, is because nobody knows what you're going to say or what they're going to hear on whatever day in that moment, those moments that you talked about, where that willingness, where it may not have been 2005, but then it happened in 2007, but like what's different, and just those moments of willingness, glimmers of hope, a moment of grace, whatever you want to call it, right?
Yeah. And you just hope that you're catching them at that point.
Yeah.
As we talked about, the one and only requirement for recovery is to be above ground.
I love that so much.
As long as you're above ground, everything is possible.
Everything. Yeah.
And so, that's how I live my life, trying to connect in that one moment. And you're not always successful.
No.
I know you've lost friends.
Too many.
I've lost friends and colleagues, as I'm sure you have, that families tried. You tried and tried and tried. And not just fentanyl, around alcohol too.
Of course. Yeah.
Just alcohol. I've lost friends to alcoholism, pure alcoholism.
Mm-hmm.
And you've just tried and they weren't ready. They didn't want it. It's a helpless feeling, even when you understand it, right? We're human too. Even when we understand it, why? Why aren't you getting this? You're going to die. Your liver's about to explode. You know this. I've had this with lawyers recently. And you're going to lose your kids. You have a newborn. Why are you doing this? Because we're human and you get frustrated.
You do. But you actually have the understanding of it because you've been on the other side.
Yeah.
So, that's where your story and your power comes in.
Yeah.
And you also know that you can't help somebody that doesn't want help either.
I mean, I'm human. You hang up the phone and you're like, oh.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's not for the faint of heart, but it is admirable work that you're doing. And we certainly appreciate you coming on today. Couldn't have asked for a better podcast. Thank you so much for your time and even flying out to Sausalito. Everybody that's listening, he came all the way out here to do this. So,
It was just such an inconvenience flying to beautiful Sausalito.
Right? You had to really twist your arm for that one.
Yeah, you had to really twist my arm to come to Sausalito. No, I am honored that you had me on. This was a wonderful chit-chat, wonderful conversation, dialogue, and I hope we get to do it again sometime.
Safe travels to you, sir.